Well, you can't say I didn't warn you, I guess. I am heartbroken tonight for Academy Award winning director Ezra Edelman because Netflix has announced, as was widely reported today, that it is in fact canceling its Prince documentary, which was directed by Ezra Edelman, has been completed for more than a year. It was a 9 hour long series, originally only scheduled to be 6 hours. This was one of the quibbles the Prince estate used manipulatively to squirm their way out of this deal and shelve this project. Now it seems quite likely they have shelved it permanently, and the world never will see this documentary. And that is a gutting tragedy for a variety of reasons that I will get into. Ezra Edelman not only came up with a documentary that was 9 hours long, and that detail in and of itself explains the volume of work, the investment of time, the investment of energy, the investment of resources, the sort of the soul shaking nature of the work that Ezra Edelman poured into this project, now seemingly all for nothing. All for nothing. He spent 5 years of his life producing this project, countless hours, working week in and week out, working long weekends, having very little life outside of this project. You know, if you followed me at this channel for any length of time, that I've discussed all of this in great length in a number of long videos about the saga surrounding this documentary, which now has culminated in the predictable but pathetic conclusion of Netflix having to cave to the Prince Estate's pressure and shelve this project permanently, canceling it. It's done. Put a fork in it. This is such a sad moment for contemporary American pop music. It's such a sad moment for Prince fans, and it's such a gutting loss for them. And I would argue a gutting loss for Prince himself, although the estate, of course, is going to argue otherwise. And I think they're profoundly wrong about this. Rolling Stone reported today, by the way, speaking of the volume of work, the effort, the blood, sweat, and tears that Ezra Edelman poured into this project, Rolling Stone reported in a piece on this Netflix cancellation today that the documentary comprised no fewer than 70 interviews. 70. By Ezra Edelman, who previously won an Academy Award and an Emmy. In doing so, making history, winning both an Academy Award and an Emmy for his 2016 documentary, O.J. Simpson Made in America. Because that documentary blurred the boundary between primetime TV and feature film. Ezra Edelman is a history-making master of the craft that he practiced with this documentary, the emotional impact of which was immediate and profound on the few people who had the miraculous blessing of getting to actually see this documentary. And it seems like they will be the last group of people on the planet to ever see it, unless perhaps some hackers get their hands on it or something crazy like that happens. It doesn't seem like it's going to be possible for the world to be availed of the brilliance of this documentary. As was reported at length by Sasha Weiss of the New York Times, I dug deeply into that story about the documentary in a prior video. I'll link to that in the description. I'll link to some stories about Netflix's cancellation of this documentary as well. Check out the description for more information about this pitiable end to what should have been a great film that probably would have been celebrated in every way imaginable had the Prince Estate found it within itself to be more reasonable than they're being here. By the way, this constitutes a huge financial bullet for Netflix to bite, because as the New York Times reported last year, the streaming platform spent tens of millions of dollars securing Ezra Edelman access to the so-called vault, as it is known by Princeologists. And today's reporting seems to suggest that the nature of the deal, as it's being described, probably is that the Prince Estate, I guess, bought back the rights to his vault that they had sold to Netflix for the purpose of this documentary's production. Now, this statement that the Prince Estate put out about Netflix's cancellation of this documentary reeks of BS. The statement reads as follows. The Prince Estate and Netflix have come to a mutual agreement that will allow the estate to develop and produce a new documentary featuring exclusive content from Prince's archive. As a result, the Netflix documentary will not be released. But when it comes to the so called vault, to quote Gertrude Stein's takedown of Oakland, California, there is no there there. And we know that because Ezra Edelman, who dug as deeply into that vault as anyone on earth, told us so. We know this from the New York Times' reporting on this, which said that Edelman and his team discovered that Prince's personal archive contained, quote, almost nothing that was spontaneous or personal. Almost no footage of Prince recording or writing. At one point, they were excited to discover a few home videos of Prince horsing around with girlfriends, but when they watched the tapes, they appeared to have been deliberately damaged. Exclusive content of what? What are they talking about? Ezra Edelman certainly knows better, and he said so through this New York Times piece. As one of the film's two main editors put it, Prince's personal archive was, quote, not all that different from an Instagram account or a Facebook page. It was manicured, curated just the way Prince wanted it. Oh, man. So, yeah, give me that exclusive content from the vault. I can't wait to see what that yields. I mean, Ezra Edelman, who spent 5 years of his life toiling over this piece, that vault itself was one of the central reasons for how much of a struggle this project was for him, because there's nothing there. No wonder it took Ezra Edelman the 5 years that he invested in rounding up 70 interviews. And by all the reporting on I've seen, he reached out to many more than just 70 people. Those are the 70 that, after pulling teeth for years, literally, finally got them to overcome, in some cases, their terror of Prince and sit down with Ezra Edelman and have a candid conversation with the man about this American genius that we knew so well, at least through his music, and miss so dearly since his untimely death. Londell McMillan, the co-founder of the Prince organization that represents his work, said in a separate statement, quote, the vault is free. It's a big, big win for Prince's legacy. He also said at a Grammys event last weekend, there will not be any salacious documentary. We have turned the page to shine the proper light on Prince. Yes, Londell. The light of hagiography. Okay, whatever light shines on this documentary now is going to be an awfully phony one. It's going to be colored through the rose lens glasses that the Prince estate insists that fans only see Prince's legacy through. Ezra Edelman's documentary decidedly was not salacious. That is wrong. That is BS for Londell McMillan, who was savaged by Jay-Z on his album 414, as I will remind you of in a minute, suggests. This documentary, by all accounts of those who saw the documentary and or spoke with Sasha Weiss for the New York Times in her voluminous reporting about the documentary, thousands of words in the New York Times, as you can see in that video I did prior to this one, I'll again link to in the description. It looked away from nothing. In other words, Ezra Edelman did his job. He did not look away from the good or the bad. He did not look away from the beautiful or the ugly. That was his job, to call it down the middle, to tell a balanced story that honored the complexity of this genius's life and career. And when you hear Londell McMillan talk that way, again, as I just alluded to, consider the messenger. Jay-Z told us to consider the messenger when it comes to Londell McMillan. Okay, he took direct aim by name at Londell McMillan on his album 414, rapping as follows, quote, I sat down with Prince eye to eye. He told me his wishes before he died. Now, Londell McMillan, he must be colorblind. They only see green from them purple eyes. As I said previously, you think Jay-Z knows something about people who are in the music business just for the money? You think he's got some credibility in distinguishing fakes from the real thing in the music business? I think the man has seen a few things in his line of work, okay? So this is not a big win for Prince's legacy. This, frankly, is a big win for bullshit. All we're going to get now is the Disney Plus treatment of the life of a man who deserves so much more, a man whose fans deserve so much more, and who stood to get so much more, judging from the reactions to this Netflix documentary that now the world will never see. Reactions among the few who actually did get to see it, who include the following. Here's what we stand to lose, okay? Now that we're never going to see this film, thanks to Netflix deciding to cancel it under extraordinary pressure from the Prince estate itself. Sasha Weiss in the New York Times called Edelman's documentary, quote, a cursed masterpiece. A masterpiece. Novelist Danzy Senna, who also saw the film, said of the film, Black genius doesn't get that treatment. We would treat Mozart this way. Likened Ezra Edelman's treatment of Prince to Mozart. Does that sound like a salacious film to you? I don't think so. Steve James, who directed the famed documentary about a basketball documentary called Hoop Dreams, also saw the documentary and said this of the film, quote, as a viewer, you are asked to grapple in the same way the filmmaker does with all the complexity of who this guy was. Listen carefully. The good, the bad, and the ugly. The good, the bad, and the ugly. God forbid, you mean Ezra Edelman did his job, told the whole story, warts and all? This is Steve James talking again. The integrity of the filmmaker. The integrity of a filmmaker accused of having produced by the Prince estate a salacious documentary. And the completeness of it. Then listen to this. Steve James goes on to say, you know that what you are watching is indisputable. Oh, don't tell the Prince estate that. Who went on harping about, quote, factual inaccuracies, when really what they were referring to was not factual inaccuracies, but details about Prince's life they did not want the world to know. And so their way of resolving that anxiety was to accuse this Academy Award-winning director of being a liar, of being salacious. Okay? Weiss in the New York Times went on to say this, quote, Edelman offers one answer to a question that has agonized the culture at large for the last decade. How should we think about artists whose moral failings are exposed? Edelman manages to present a deeply flawed person while still granting him his greatness and his dignity. Yeah, this salacious documentary. Still granted this flawed person his greatness and his dignity. Who among us does not at least possess or embody some shade of that kind of complexity? Right? We have some flaws, and we still have people who love us, and we still have people that we love. We still have good deeds that have meant things in the lives of those around us, in the lives of those who have crossed paths with us. We are the good and the ugly in one. All of us are. Prince is no different. He was just good, bad, and ugly on a much grander scale than the vast majority of us, right? He was good, bad, and ugly before many millions of people on a very public stage. Record after record, Grammy nomination after Grammy nomination, film after film. Wesley Morris, a critic at the Times, and again, one of that small group of people who got to see this film, said, it's one of the only works I have ever seen that approximates the experience of suffering with and suffering through and alongside genius. How does an artist's genius come to the fore in a film that is merely salacious? There's a contradictory here in praise after praise after praise. The almost every note of praise here refers to the, quote, genius of the artist being at the forefront of this film. And yet we're supposed to believe, per the Prince estate, that it's somehow, quote, salacious. Something doesn't add up here. That complexity, that good, bad, and the ugly that Steve James alludes to, included things like Prince punching Jill Jones in the face. Now, factual inaccuracy? Or is Jill Jones, who is described as 30 years after the fact, still being furious about the nature of her involvement with Prince? Is she perhaps merely telling the truth about a story that the Prince estate would rather not have had disclosed to the public? And by the way, as Prince fans have said in my prior videos about this, they've known about most of this stuff. Not all of this was secret. In fact, maybe not much of it was. So the Prince estate is pretending that somehow they're going to protect Prince's legacy by ignoring the fact that this film was made, that Prince fans already knew about at least some of these uglier details of his life previously, and ignoring the fact that Sasha Weiss put out thousands of words of reporting on this documentary that left almost nothing to be imagined about what the film comprises and the things that it reveals, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Here's another aspect of the ugly in Prince's life that the Prince estate would have us believe was merely the result of factual inaccuracy. They wanted Ezra Edelman to take out the portions of his film that discussed the fact that he asked Wendy Melvoin to renounce her homosexuality. This is that portion of Prince's life when he became more religious, as a precondition for getting the band back together, getting his band back together at that time. I guarantee you Prince's estate will not be speaking with Wendy Melvoin. They won't be speaking of her either. I guarantee you the Prince's estate won't be interviewing Jill Jones and probably won't even speak of her. Right? Because we're not going to distinguish between salaciousness and the truth. We're just going to dismiss inconvenient truths as mere salacious, factual inaccuracy. Weiss sums things up this way. Quote, "That was the bottom line. Prince was both extraordinary and a regular human being who struggled with self-destructiveness and rage. That gets at the root of the complexity of Prince's character, Prince's life, and Prince's career. This universally adored genius who also did universally condemnable things in his life. And that's a kind of honoring of the complexity of Prince's character that is going to be lost in this documentary that the Prince estate now says they're going to produce. I say I'm heartbroken for Ezra Edelman because of the toll that this film took on this guy. The film took, as I said, nearly 5 years to finish. He said that it nearly broke him. He often worked nights and weekends, chasing down, this is Sasha Weiss is reporting again, recalcitrant subjects who seem haunted by their friendship with Prince, and researching in Prince's personal archive, which, as I've stated previously, was filled with gaps and elisions. And Edelman said this to Weiss that really captures the nature of his struggle in producing a documentary about this enigmatic man who so furiously protected his privacy as to apparently go out of his way to deliberately damage videos of him merely horsing around with girlfriends. He said to Weiss, quote, "How can you tell the truth about someone who, when you're talking to people, they all had different, in other words, contradictory things to say? How can you tell the truth about someone who never told the truth about himself?" Have at it, Prince Estate. Enjoy that struggle. I'm sure you can do a better job of it than a guy who's won an Academy Award practicing this craft. I'm sure. And no one in Edelman's camp is surprised by this outcome, I guarantee you that. As Sasha Weiss reported, quote, "Edelman continued to perfect his film, working to capture the essence of Prince, even as it became slowly, painfully clear that it would most likely never air, because the project was being obstructed by the Prince estate." Why did this happen? Well, the Prince estate changed hands after this Netflix deal was inked. And the new executors of his will, and by the way, don't forget, Prince died without a will in place. Chew on that for a minute. A man worth many millions of dollars, a man whose career yielded many priceless creative assets and a lot of priceless intellectual property, didn't even have a will at the time of his death. And so here we have clusters like this, right? The will changing hands, the will fragmented into several different pieces, and these new executors who came in after the Netflix documentary deal was signed, objecting to the project. As Weiss reported, quote, "The estate quickly moved to shut Edelman and his team out of the vault with no explanation, making it even more difficult to finish the film." In addition to that, in March of 2023, as I discussed previously, Lisa Nishimura, the Netflix executive who negotiated the original deal and hired Edelman, was laid off after a restructuring, a move that shocked the industry and was generally thought to signal a change in Netflix's strategy. Oh boy, has it seemed to have changed, huh? With Nishimura gone, the project lost its most powerful internal champion. So the cards were stacked against this film with each passing month, it seems, as Edelman continued to toil away at it in the face of increasing resistance. Then last spring, the estate saw a cut of the film, the 9-hour-long version of this documentary, and claimed that it misrepresented Prince, entered into this protracted battle with Netflix that, as of today, now has culminated in Netflix's decision to cancel the documentary outright. They own the rights to the film, and The Prince Estate has now succeeded apparently in buying them back, preventing its release for good. Weiss beautifully summed up, as I said previously, the film's doom status as follows. As of today, there is no indication that the film will ever come out. It has been like watching a monument being swallowed by the sea. Well, guess what? It now has been swallowed by the sea. It now will languish at the bottom of that sea, obscured from the view of the world, probably for the rest of time, it seems. There's even less indication now that it will ever come out. And this results in part from, as I mentioned, this screening that occurred last spring when the Princess State bristled at it. They did so by responding with a 17-page long document demanding changes. And Ezra Edelman's like, okay, I mean, I can see some of this, but dude, I'm not going to remove episodes or ideas that feel crucial for the film's narrative and journalistic cohesion, he said. And so that's where this was headed. The last you heard from me on this is Edelman, as an artist with integrity, was not going to change wholesale this documentary to bend it to the whims of the Prince Estate that only can see fit to withstand hagiography, that only can see fit to allow Prince's fans to see his legacy through rose-colored lenses. Ultimately, this is really all about the money, as I said previously. There was this fascinating little snippet in Weiss's piece on this, in which she reported that the estate told Ezra Edelman they believe the film, quote, would do generational harm to Prince. Several people I spoke to said they believed Londell Macmillan's objections came down to a fear that the film will get Prince canceled and devalue the estate's bottom line. One wonders how it's going to enhance the estate's bottom line when this documentary that they say they're going to produce now comes out and experienced film critics lift their noses at it, knowing all about what happened here with a real documentarian's work on this film, Netflix's subsequent cancellation of it. They're all gonna smell BS when this documentary comes out. I can practically guarantee it. It's going to be hagiography. Film critics are going to say so. It's going to come out to probably middling reviews. It's going to get very little, if any, notice at awards shows, which I think would have been quite the opposite had Edelman's documentaries ever seen the light of day. How's that going to enhance the value of the Prince Estate? I'd love to know. What's that really going to do for Prince's legacy? To plop upon the world this forgettable fraud of a documentary that they say they're going to put out. Look, I've complained ad nauseum about the whitewashing hagiography that passes for biopics and documentaries about famed musicians on this channel. I have a whole playlist that you can check out about the downfall of the music biopic and the music documentary. I think we now can say with confidence that whatever adoring and sanitizing carp the Prince Estate ejects from its manicured vault will amount to nothing more than yet another example of a film that falls profoundly short of its subject's importance. The loss is profound. It's endlessly sad that it's come to this, and yet patently predictable that it has. So I'll link to some of the reporting on Netflix's cancellation of the film. If you're new to this channel, you're new to my discussion of the whole drama surrounding this Prince documentary, there's plenty more to see on this channel. I have 3 prior videos, each that go on at length about everything that has happened here. And the descriptions of each of those videos include many links to further information about it. So I feel like the Curious Listener is your one-stop shop for all the information you need about the saga that is this Prince documentary. It's very sad that it's come to this, but as you'll see after watching those videos, terribly predictable as well. My heart breaks for Ezra Edelman. Ezra, I am so sorry that you spent 5 years of your life toiling over a documentary that the world will never see. It is cruel. It is a terrible fate for you to suffer as an artist. My hope for you is that Hollywood understands what truly has happened here, that Hollywood can see the forest from the trees, understand that the problem here was not factual inaccuracy, but rather the Prince Estate's unwillingness to face the truth about the man at the heart of its endeavor, which is Prince. And Ezra, I can't wait to see what's next for you, man, and I really hope for the best for any future projects that await in the years ahead.